Thank you for joining us today in this walkthrough of A Letter to the Future. We are here at LAX. It's unbelievable. LAX is back to normal after being kind of a deserted territory. There are so many people traveling again. It's wonderful.
How are you, Sarah?
Good afternoon. How are you? It's so nice to see you. And to be here in person at LAX and looking at art in person. Finally, it's a real treat. So Thank you so much for joining us today. Also just want to say hello and welcome to everybody who's joining us on this webinar. Welcome to LAX. LAX is open and it's busy and it's exciting to see everybody returning to travel. But before we get started today, I thought I'd just give a little bit of background about the LAX art program, because there might be folks in the audience who may not be aware that we even have an art program here at LAX. So the art program was founded in 1990, and since 2002, we partnered with the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. And the LAX art program, we present temporary exhibitions, and we also present permanent art commissions, as well as live music performances. Although our live music performances have been on hiatus for a year and a half due to COVID, but we're looking forward to bringing those back soon. And the reason that the airport has an art program is because we feel that it's very important to welcome people to the city of Los Angeles, and to create an environment that is beautiful, but also is part of the travel experience. So it's a very welcoming environment, but we also we understand that travel can be really stressful at times. So by delivering art experiences, we hope to help relieve some of those moments of anxiety or stress. And I think it's also important to note that the art program can also serve as a platform to communicate the city's values and aspirations to the world. And then also, I think it's important to note that for many visitors, the airport is often the first and last place that they may visit in the city. So it's a way for the art program to help create positive and lasting first and last impressions of the city of Los Angeles.
Well, thank you, Sarah, so much. Thank you for this unbelievable opportunity. I started developing the Iceberg Series in 2017, and it was my dream to create a big, monumental, and powerful exhibition. And I think I have been able to create this year. So thank you for the generosity that everybody has provided me, because it's been really amazing. And I hope that everybody at home, in their homes, are going to enjoy what we're going to show them today. So basically, the Iceberg Series intends to show the beauty of nature. When people look at my works at the iceberg, I want people to feel the wonder that they experience when they see a natural wonder for the very first time. I want them to feel that awe, that sense of joy, that overwhelming sense of joy when they see the sea, a cascade, an incredible mountain for the very first time. At the same time, I want the audience to become aware of environmentalism. So I think these works are a good balance between showing the beauty of nature, but at the same time creating awareness in the public about the climate warming and the danger that our Earth is going through. And the fact that we don't have a lot of time left, and that unless we all do our part in taking care of the planet and making sure the temperature of our planet doesn't rise, we won't be able to live on this planet for a lot longer. So icebergs, I think, are the perfect example of this. Still, these icebergs are not documentary pieces. I don't expect my icebergs to be perfect photographs of a perfect like a National Geographic photograph. These are all psychological landscapes. So these are all imaginary icebergs that I create with photographs that I've taken from mountains in California, pieces of ice. And also I'm incorporating photographs that my friends have given me on their trips, photographs from encyclopedias, from the internet. So I combine my personal history with a collective memory. And I create these psychological landscapes. In most of these pieces, you will see some minute elements from the human world inserted in them. And those elements in particular talk about human invasion into nature. But again, I talk about them in a very surreal and theatrical manner. I approach my work in a very visually attractive manner. So everything is very beautiful and everything has this surreal and theatrical tone. So spectators are really attracted to the work. And once they're attracted, they start a dialogue and they start thinking about what's really going on and what is the message underneath.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about the title of the exhibition? Because I think that factors into the message that you want viewers to take with them.
Yes, of course. So A Letter to the Future is the title of a poem of an Icelandic author. And it's a poem that was written on a monument dedicated to the first iceberg that was lost in Iceland due to climate change. And basically the poem says that in the next 200 years, all icebergs are going to disappear. And unless humanity does something about it, we will all disappear, humanity will disappear. And if somebody reads this poem in 200 years from now, this means that humanity has survived and we made it. So the poem is very dramatic. It's a tragedy.
This series was inspired by an article that I read in 2017, in which I read that a piece of iceberg had broken off Antarctica and it was drifting aimlessly on the ocean, on the Atlantic Ocean. And scientists didn't know where this piece of iceberg was going to end up. And I found this image so symbolic and so poetic at the same time. And I also related it to my experience as an immigrant. I was born in Argentina, then I moved to Miami, and then I moved to LA. And the fact that I've been moving from country to country, crossing the oceans, I found these parallelisms with my own life, and also the isolation of myself as an immigrant and the isolation of seeing an iceberg floating in the ocean. So I found these parallelisms and also the beauty of it. And that's what inspired me this series.
I wanted to touch on that a little bit more. You mentioned you're from Argentina, and we're looking at these representations of icebergs. And I know you've referenced, the title references the poem that was done by a writer from Iceland. But being from Argentina, you know, that's the homeland to Patagonia, which also has a very dramatic, icy, rocky landscape. And I was curious, did you draw upon that landscape of your homeland when you were creating this body of work?
Some of my pieces incorporate some of the landscapes from Argentina. So it's very interesting because I'm combining landscapes of the glaciers from Argentina, but also from Iceland, from Alaska as well, but also mountains from California. So it's a
composite of your life,
of my life,
right? Yes, through these images.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we move on to the next work, I know we wanted to maybe touch on this one in terms of like the symbolism of the color palette that you're using. Do you want to talk about that now?
Yes, of course. So the biggest pieces in the exhibition are this one, day, and at the very end of the exhibition, you will see night. They are both the same size. They are these monumental pieces. And of course, day represents the beginning of a day. And I think this exhibition wants to present in a way life from the beginning to the end, or from the end to beginning, and talk about rebirth. And we can also relate it to what we've all been living through in the last year, like the darkness and then coming back to life again. So this is the symbolism of this piece, about the beginning or rebirth of life and starting again, all over again.
Wonderful.
Yes.
All right, it's such a beautiful work. But let's move on to the next one.
But at the same time, I want this piece to be very contemplative. So I want the spectators, the fact that it's so big and monumental, I want spectators to really get lost in the work, to be immersed in it and get lost in the beauty and really admire the beauty of nature.
Wonderful. Yes. Okay, so we'll move on to the next work here. And so this is a good example of where you start to incorporate sort of man-made elements and what those speak to in terms of, like, humanity's impact on the environment. And then I think it also takes on special significance because of the last year we all went through in 2020. And for the viewers at home, it's she has inserted an image of a Ferris wheel, but with no people on it. So it feels very much like how we all experienced last year, that we couldn't go to theme parks, we couldn't go to movie theaters, we couldn't go to concerts. And so we had very empty landscapes, yes, very empty public spaces. And I know that, this body of work was, of course, created before COVID, but these works have taken on different meaning, I think, over the past year, in terms of the isolation that we all went through. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, of course. So when I created these pieces with these very dark skies, I wanted to create this kind of post-apocalyptic pieces that were totally surreal and out of this world. And I was thinking of almost like a science fiction movie. A dark sky with a Ferris wheel, like an abandoned Ferris wheel. And then we went through a lockdown and COVID, and what I was depicting as science fiction and surreal became our reality. A Ferris wheel being empty, and in the case of another piece that we will see later, a theater and theater seats being empty as well. So absolutely, as I've been bringing visitors to see the exhibition after COVID, and everybody has started telling me how much they relate to the exhibition and how much they feel like these icebergs, because they all feel this isolation. Everybody has felt this isolation when they were locked down in their homes last year. And it's very interesting. And I think this is the power of art. Sometimes art imitates life and some life imitates art. And this is what has happened here. Yes. No, I mean, what I'm going to mention also is that you will see many works with very dark skies. And these are the very first pieces that I created for this exhibition. I mean, all the works in this exhibition were created specifically for this space. So I started creating all these dark pieces, but then I thought, these works are going to an airport. And as you see, and as you said, the artworks here are meant to enhance the traveler's experience. And I was also thinking, as a traveler, as somebody who's going to get on a plane, I would also like to be uplifted by the art, not only see something like a post-apocalyptic scene. So that's when I realized that I needed to create a balance between dark and light. So as we move along and we see the artworks in the exhibition, you will see pieces that are very dark and pieces that are very dry, light, bright, and uplifting. So as to create this balance between light and dark.
So here we have one of the brighter works. We see a buoy here floating in the ocean surrounded by icebergs. And icebergs that look like they have had portions, break off and start melting. The palette in this is so interesting because in some ways, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it almost feels tropical. Could you comment on that? And I know you spent some time in Florida, and I was just curious if that was in the back of your mind when you landed on this sort of image and in the colors that you used in it.
Yeah. It's a very interesting question because there are some works that I created around 20 years ago that have a very similar palette, very similar elements, but a different technique. And I think, yes, I think the colors are totally inspired by my life in Miami. That's why I think this series is so personal. As much as it talks about environmental issues, it's so personal. It really talks about my life and my life living in different countries and how what my experience has been. So the colors are very personal, very tropical, and also the buoy that is floating is a buoy that was floating in Hong Kong. I had an exhibition 20 years ago in Hong Kong, and I was crossing the bay on the ferry, and I took a photograph of this buoy. And I'm generally very attracted to red and white elements when they are tiny. And I took a photograph of that floating in the ocean, and I've incorporated it into this piece. And again, the work talks about human invasion into the natural world. I mean, we see this beautiful, dreamy landscape, and then we see this tiny human element. And it's beautiful, but at the same time, it's unbelievable that even in the most, the furthermost places of the earth, you can still find something that belongs to human civilization. So this is what the work is about.
Right, and it's like it shouldn't be there. And so that, I think pulls the viewer in a little bit more. What's happening here?
Yes.
And I've noticed in the work that you've done, this work as well as other work I know you've done in the past, is that you have elements that are familiar to the viewer, so they recognize something, and then I think you also use humor to pull them in and to maybe comment, and then you're using that, you've got their attention, and then you can get people to think a little deeper. What are these elements that you've selected and you've placed in your works?
Well, I think when you want to talk about serious issues, you can either talk about them in a very serious manner with drama, or you can talk about them with beauty and humor. And that's the way that I choose to do it, with beauty and humor. I think people are more attracted to humor and to beauty. And I think I can attract a bigger audience that way. I can even attract kids. So I can even talk about the environment with kids because they are attracted to a beautiful landscape. And then I can start telling them about the environment. And then I can start asking them, what do you think this buoy is doing here? So that's generally how I create my works. And sometimes I create my landscapes, and then I think what kind of element I can incorporate into the landscape, what kind of human element I can incorporate into it. And sometimes it's the opposite way. Sometimes there's a very specific element that has a very symbolic or connection to me. And then I think how I can incorporate it into the landscape. Like this buoy this photograph of this buoy has been in my studio for the last 20 years as a print, when we used to print photographs. And it's even bent and blurry, and it's been moving with me. And I've had it, and I've always been thinking, how can I incorporate it in my next artwork? So it depends on the case. Yes.
Well, I love that there's so many personal elements from all areas of your life that made their way into your work.
Mm-hmm.
So wonderful. You're always sort of gathering the visual information, so you never know where you might use it later on.
Yes,
in an artwork.
exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let's go on maybe to...
Yes, let's go.
So we're kind of in the center of the gallery now.
Uh-huh.
And these works, are bookending the center of the gallery. And you're using color here and also on the other side. And of course, these are colors that differ very greatly than the previous artworks we just looked at. You're really using, sort of hyper, bright colors, hyper pigmented colors. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So these are 4 pieces that I created for the exhibition. You're seeing 2 here, and then I'll present the other 2. They are square, 40 by 40 inches, and they present this beautiful, bright colored skies. And they are more abstract pieces. As you see, they present like the close-up of an iceberg. For me, the icebergs here look like sculptures. They look like brutalist sculptures. They are seen more in an abstract manner. And the fact that the colors are so surreal and they are not real at all, talk about a world that we no longer know. It's a world that has changed beyond recognition. So that's the meaning behind these works and the meaning behind these powerful, bright colored skies. Even though they look very beautiful and very attractive, but they talk about a tragedy, actually.
Yeah, I think when I first looked at your works that you were proposing for this exhibition, and then I saw the layout for the exhibition, you had placed these here, and then maybe we'll walk to the other side. You placed these sort of, facing into the center of the gallery, and then they're paired on the other side of the center of the gallery with these 2 bright artworks.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, the sort of the pairing of these works together was sort of like a call to action. It felt like a call to action to me. It's sort of a warning, to stop, look, and listen. You're using a palette that's, like you said, not of the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And I really saw it as like a way to call attention to the issues that you want to highlight. And so I was curious, was that part of your thinking as well, that this was sort of almost like saying, there's a bit of an alarming situation here and you're highlighting it through color.
It's something very symbolic, but at the same time, it's something very attractive. But what I also want to highlight is the fact that every time I work on artworks for an exhibition, I always want to push my own limits and do something that I've never done before. And these works are something that are totally new to me. The fact that they are so abstract in a way, my work is always very figurative. So the fact that I created something so abstract, they look almost like pop artwork. So they are very experimental. And it's like pushing the limits of my work and what I can do. So that's what I really like about creating an exhibition and creating and developing these projects. The fact that I really don't want to present every exhibition something that I've already done before. I always like to present something new and something that I've never done before. So this is the perfect opportunity to do it. And the fact that it gets to be shared with so many people, so many travelers, is a privilege. As we were talking with Sarah the other day, before COVID, there are around 88 million people who travel through LAX.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I cannot think how many places are visited by 88 million people a year.
That's right. Right. So in 2019, we had, just almost 88 million passengers. I think we had something like 700 daily flights out of LAX. So that's a lot of people traveling to every corner of the world. And then that changed quite dramatically last year, where we saw a drop off of traffic by 95%. So, down to about maybe 5 million passengers total. So it was a remarkable year, and sort of how LAX sort of weathered that as one of our civic spaces. So yeah, it's really, really dramatic. We're really living in very dramatic times.
Yes. But at the same time, it's wonderful as the airport opened up again, and I've been coming in the last months to bring guests to see how the public is coming back to, the flyers are coming back to the airport. It's so uplifting.
Yes, exactly. And I think people are eager to travel.
Yes.
And your landscapes, I think, sort of, feed into that desire to explore further. So should we move on to the next wall? We have the large iceberg, and then we have a smaller work here that is almost like a detail of ice floating in the ocean. Could you talk about that a little bit in terms of how you came up with this composition, and what does that mean? What does the smaller piece mean in relation to the larger work?
Yes, of course. So this piece is a collaboration between a dear friend of mine who's also a curator. Her name is Francine Birk-Brager. She lives in Miami, and she shared with me some photographs she had taken in Alaska of icebergs. So this piece here is one of her photographs of pieces of an iceberg that are actually floating in the ocean. So this piece is titled Abyss. And what I wanted to show here are like the opposites. In this piece, I'm presenting the top of an iceberg. It's beautiful top. Again, very dreamy landscape. But at the same time, there is a sense of danger because you see an abyss. So you can fall. So you can see this as a symbolism for the endangered environment. And this is like a very big scene. And then here you can see the tiny details of a broken iceberg. So here it's like you see the results of what can happen to the environment if we continue on the path that we are going on at the moment. And the fact that this is a very big piece and this is a small piece, it's kind of playful, and it's kind of a puzzle piece. Again, I think it's about using humor for spectators, and I think visually it breaks up the exhibition and the shapes of the exhibition. It makes the exhibition visually more interesting in terms of shapes, and it really catches your attention and really makes you walk close and see what's going on here. So it really makes you establish a different connection with the artwork, because your body has to read the artwork in a different manner.
That's right, because I think you've got the large work, which is sort of one scale, and then the smaller one, which is another scale, and that one feels, more like you said. You can get up close, you can see the detail to it, and so you read it in a different way. And then it makes me think of the idea of transformation, and that these icebergs are going through this dramatic transformation. And then it also makes me think about, climate change, and then what that impact has on human migration patterns. And Los Angeles is no stranger to some of our own, environmental issues with mudslides and drought and things like that. And so while we might be looking at a landscape that is, foreign to us and on a daily basis, I feel like it relates very closely to a lot of the environmental issues that, as Angelenos, we have to think about. And I know your work in the past has really touched on water. Exactly, yeah. And things like that. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of water in your work?
Yes. Well, I've been working with the theme of water for 20 years. And since I arrived in Los Angeles 15 years ago, I think my work, because of California's strong commitment to environmental issues, my work has become more environmentally conscious. And in the last 15 years, I've seen the most dramatic droughts and the most dramatic floods. So, we can read a lot about scientists and what scientists are writing about climate change, but we can also see these changes in everyday life when we see the droughts and the floods
and the fires.
Yep. So again, we can see this at different levels. And water is a series. I mean, water is an element that started in Miami, and I've continued through working with this element here in Los Angeles. And actually, icebergs are frozen water. So it's the same element presented in a different manner. Yes.
Wonderful. I think we're going to just spin around and catch this work. And this, again, is another great example where you have taken something from sort of this urban society or civilization, and it's theater seats, as if it were like at one point was part of a theater, but they're now empty, and that's all that's left on the landscape. And again, it resonates with the kind of year we just went through last year. And it takes on a whole nother significance, I think. What else would you like to say about this work and how you selected maybe this particular human element to represent sort of the impact that humans have on our environment?
Yes. Well, the theater is an element that has always been present in my artwork. Ever since the beginning, when I was an art student, I always liked to create theatrical scenes. So when I came across some red theater seats going through some magazines, I thought it was, again, perfect. I said, okay, this is what I've always been working on. And again, these are empty theater seats. When I created these, I was thinking of something totally sci-fi, surreal scene, empty theater seats on a deserted iceberg. It looks like a totally apocalyptic scene, something that would never happen in this world. And then all of a sudden, all our theaters all around the world were empty, and we couldn't sit on them. So again, we're talking about artworks that looked like something that we would never see in our lives to something that became our reality.
Right. It took on a whole other meaning that we couldn't have predicted.
Absolutely.
So it's just amazing how that sort of changes sort of our perception of the work and how you think about the work. So it's really, really, really interesting. Also, do you want to talk a little bit about your technique? Because you're incorporating a couple different techniques when you create these works.
Yes.
And I know you also explore different kinds of materials to get the kinds of effects that are produced in your work. So if you could talk about that.
Yes, I think this is a great work to talk about technique because of the details and the pencil work here. So all my works are digital collages. So I create the landscapes, these imaginary landscapes. And the landscapes are printed on a watercolor paper, which is then mounted on a wood panel. And my background is as a painter. So I always need to add the human touch to the photograph. I really cannot leave the photograph looking like a photograph. So I work over the surface with different amounts of pencils, and in this case, soft pastels. Soft pastels are like a chalk, like a powder, that create this beautiful velvet surface. Of course, here, we have the plexiglass in all the artworks because this is a public space. Again, it's a new technique that I developed when I started creating the series. It was very challenging because soft pastels are very delicate. They are like a chalk. Then you have to fix them with spray. There were a lot of trial and error. Sometimes it worked well, sometimes it didn't. If people come close to the artwork, they will see all the pencil work and the pencil work and the texture of the pencil and the soft pastels.
Okay, so we're at the sort of the bookend of the gallery, sort of the mirror opposite of the first work that we started at, which is called Day, and then this one is called Night. And obviously it has a very dramatic sky and color palette to it. So would you like to talk about the symbolism surrounding this work?
Yes. So we saw day, which was a beautiful dawn, and now we see night, which presents a beautiful galaxy. This work is very surreal because even though we see a dark galaxy, the iceberg has a very strong light, and the source of light is coming from the right. And actually, it makes no sense. It's totally absurd. So, my work draws a lot from the theater of the absurd. There are things that have no logical explanation. And I think these weird things that are going on make the work attractive and really create this connection with the public. They want to figure out, there's something weird that they sense, but they really don't know what it is. And again, it's symbolic because the first work we saw was day. This is night. And we can think, this is the beginning, this is the end. Or we can talk about this is the end of the day. And as you walk through to your, taking your plane to your terminal, then you see the day. So it's the beginning of a new day. It's, we're talking about rebirth. So it's really beautiful according to which direction of the terminal you're walking, how you can interpret the two big anchors of this exhibition.
And I think you put a lot of thought into the layout of this exhibition, because this being an airport and not a traditional, gallery or museum, people are on their way to catch a flight or to go get their luggage. And so they may only experience one direction of the exhibition, but there's still that message of that they can take away in terms of what this means in terms of the environmental issues that you're touching on. And I think in many ways, it's also redefining what a landscape, exhibition looks like. And that people may initially read this as an exhibition about the landscape. Mm-hmm. But I think you've done it in such a innovative way, layered with so many other issues, that you've really elevated, that the viewing experience. So I just really want to thank you and congratulate you on your work. It's a real honor to share your work with the passengers here at LAX. And I think this is a wonderful context for our passengers to see the work and have a lot to think about as they go about their travels and adventures in the world. Okay. So is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, well, again, thank you so much. It's my honor to have developed this exhibition for this space. It's like a dream come true. I think it's my best exhibition up to date. So thank you so much for allowing me the space and the opportunity to do this.
You're very welcome. And thank you so much for sharing the work with the traveling public.
The other thing that I wanted to say that I think it's so important about this exhibition is the fact that there are so many people that are intimidated about going to a museum or to a gallery to experience art. And the fact that these very well-curated exhibitions are public and they're accessible to everybody going through the airport. I think this is so important because it makes art so accessible to not to only the Los Angeles community, but to the global community.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think this is it's a great way to show people sort of the vibrancy of our city and what artists are thinking about. The art program really likes to show contemporary art as a reflection of what the city is thinking and doing and making. And my hope is that it might inspire people to check out other, art and cultural venues throughout the city, because we're so lucky to live in a city with, incredible cultural resources. Yes. Yes. So it is my hope that people will, if they come to Los Angeles and maybe they didn't have a museum or gallery trip as part of their itinerary, this at least, adds a little layer of art and culture. And I think it just enhances the overall, experience of Los Angeles.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what, with the work that you've produced here, and, I know you did a lot of experimentation with materials and techniques and just sort of thinking through a lot of the personal elements that you incorporated into this work. I was curious, what's ahead for you and your work? And, with the work that you did in this exhibition, how are you moving that forward in future work or work that you have planned for the future?
That's very interesting. Well, this year it's been incredible because some projects started coming up related to video. So
excellent.
I've been working a bit with video, and that is something that I'll continue working and exploring. But also, I'm continuing developing this technique of this mixed media on wood panel and working with the pencils and the pastels. And I've been developing this new series called Road Trip that I developed during the pandemic because we couldn't fly. So I took a road trip and I was inspired by the landscapes of the American West. So it's kind of the icebergs, but not icebergs anymore. These icebergs have become the mountains of the American West. So it's a series that I'm really enjoying. And they have this connection with the pieces that we saw here with the very bright green and pink skies. So this new series of the road trip present this kind of crazy landscapes with these very bright sky colors, because it's a road trip that I was taken in the American West during lockdown, during times where we were seeing a world through different eyes, and the world had changed, and it was a different world that we didn't know what it was. So that symbolism that I'm using here with the icebergs, it's something that I'm still developing in my new series. One question that maybe we have artists in the audience. Maybe would you like to tell how I was selected for this exhibition? If there are artists who are interested in the next opportunity, how they can apply?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we partner with the Department of Cultural Affairs. And so what we do is every few years, maybe every 3 years or so, we put out a call for exhibition proposals through the Department of Cultural Affairs to advertise the art opportunities here at the airport, the exhibitions program being one of them. And so you had applied through that program. And then we assemble a panel that review the submissions, and then we create a short list or a pre-qualified list of artists that we then work with over the next couple years, placing them in exhibition sites throughout the airport. So we haven't released a new RFP since you applied, given COVID and everything last year. We kind of slowed things down and were able to extend a lot of our exhibitions. But we will be releasing that call for exhibition proposals, I would say, within the next 6 months, probably before the end of the year. And in order to receive that notification, artists can go to the Department of Cultural Affairs website, which is culturela.org, and they can sign up for our mailing list or their mailing list, and you'll be notified about art opportunities at LAX Airport.
That is wonderful. I think many, many artists, everybody asked me, well, how did you get this opportunity? And I said, well, I wrote a proposal and I applied, like the old-fashioned way.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's we really do want to cast the net wide, and we can show a wide variety of artworks. Obviously we show two-dimensional work, but we also can show sculptural work and video, et cetera. So, we would love to have as many submissions as possible when we do the call for exhibition proposals.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So lovely to see you in person.
Without masks?
Yes. We're fully vaccinated.
Yes.
Looking forward to a bright future.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for joining us.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Bye-bye.